Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our bokeh project. Aww. We have Keenan here working the cameras.
Hello.
Hi Keenan. And this project is actually really straightforward and fun and simple and, I mean, dare I say fast? Probably not.
Oh dear.
Because once I get talking, y'all know. Okay, so we're gonna be doing this project in 4 steps. So our very first step is we will be putting in a gradient wash. We want our darkest value in this corner and then to our lightest value here. Our second step is we will be working quickly and lifting color using a damp paintbrush and a damp paper towel. And then we'll let that dry. Our third step, we'll put in our stems. And then our very last step, we will put in our little blossoms here.
Sweet.
Okay.
That bokeh is crazy.
Yes, and I mean, I've heard a couple different ways to pronounce it.
Oh.
I heard bokeh and I've heard bokeh. I like bokeh better, but bokeh is kind of fun.
Bokeh is fun. I think of flowers though.
Oh, yep,
You know?
yep.
But bokeh, that's the first way I ever heard it pronounced.
Me too.
So.
But then I just listened to the Google sound of
Oh,
it,
dear.
and they pronounced it bokeh. So I'm like, ooh, okay.
No way.
So we are using 4 colors in this project. Our very first color is berry blue. Our second color is emerald green. Our third color is Payne's gray. And our last color is bleed proof white.
Yes.
We are using 3 paintbrushes, a round 2, a round 6, and a wash 1. Round 2 and round 6 are our go-to brushes. I've started to use wash 1s, and round 12s way more. They're just kind of fun, but please just use whatever you have. The paints that we're using are liquid watercolor. They're our in-house paint brand, Dandelion paints, but you can use whatever colors you got. We're all about just like painting here, so use what you have, okay? And the paper. This is not 100% cotton paper, but I feel like it does a pretty decent job for not being 100% cotton paper, and it's our LMA paper. It's cold pressed, 140 pound, and I cut it in half and taped it down using Holbein soft tape, which is my favorite tape in the whole world. We good?
Nailed it.
All right, let's do our oath, and then we are gonna get into painting. So if you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, and I love to start that way because before we start a project, sometimes we're just kind of like stressing and we're thinking that it's got to be better or look just like the original. And we don't believe in that here. We believe in having fun. We believe that comparison is the thief of joy, and the whole point of creating is for joy. It's the best.
One of my favorite quotes that you've shared with me is, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yes.
I absolutely love that.
Me too.
It speaks to me in so many different volumes.
Me too.
Low, medium.
Keenan. Okay. So I'm gonna talk before we get into it because step 1 and 2 are gonna happen very quickly. So I'm gonna use my 1-inch wash to do my gradient wash here. Now I wanna point out it's not gonna be a smooth gradient. I'm gonna do some like darker values here and there. And you might be wondering what is bokeh or bokeh, and it's a photography term where essentially it's an out of focus area. So if you think of a photograph and like let's say something is in the foreground and in focus, that's sharp, and then the background is fuzzy. Now when you combine that fuzziness with elements of light, you get kind of these circles and pixelated elements, and so that is kind of the illusion that we're trying to recreate here in our painting, and it's super fun. I've watched a few tutorials on how to do it actually, and I really struggled with it, and it took me a few times to figure out how to do it. Now, from what I've seen other people teach it, what they do is they'll do a full layer and let it dry, and then use like a circle with the damp paper towel and lift and let that dry, and then do another layer and like do that on top of each other on top of each other. And I it had great effects, but I really struggled with that. So I just wanted to do another way that was a little bit more straightforward and simple and fast. So I want you to know that there are many ways that you can approach painting a project. And I'm just gonna show you a way that I found that was simple, but if that doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that this project is not for you or that you can't do this technique. It maybe means that this technique is not for you in the way that I'm teaching it. So I just want to encourage you that like, there's so many different ways to learn. There's so many different techniques of how you can go about painting a painting. As my grandma used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So I just want to say like, if this isn't your way, find a new way. But I hope that you like it because it worked for me. So we'll see. Okay. So I'm going to lay my layer down using my 1 inch and then working very quickly. I'm going to go immediately into step 2, which is lifting circles up. Now, I didn't use anything to like measure, like some people will use like the inside of a tape thing. I just like made circles with my paintbrush and I was okay if they weren't perfect circles. Okay?
Okay.
Well, let's just go for it then.
Let's do it.
All right.
I'm ready. I am so ready.
I'm ready. Okay, so I'm going to take my 1 inch wash and I'm going to mix berry blue and emerald green together. And the reason why I'm doing this is I kind of want a desaturated, I want to like desaturate this green just a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. And then I'm going to add water to get a lighter value over here. Okay. And let's just see what my light value. Okay, so you see how like when I just add water to the emerald green, how bright that green is?
Yeah.
And then when I added water to the mixture of the berry blue and the green, see it's still a lighter green, but it's not as vibrant.
Right.
So pick your poison. Which one do you want? Do you want super vibrant or do you want a little bit chiller? It's up to you. Okay, and then I'm just going to immediately grab some of this and just go for it. Grabbing water to help that color move, grabbing more color as I go, working quickly, not being precious. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure that my bottom is nice and dark here. And excuse me, I'm just gonna go like super fast because I kind of ran out of paint here. I'm gonna do another layer really quick in this bottom corner. And then this is where I'm gonna kind of just do like brush strokes, you see? But mostly in this left-hand side where it's a little bit darker. So it's not super even. You see?
I think so.
Do you see?
Yeah, scattered.
And maybe I'll introduce a little bit of Payne's gray to make sure it is, I really want it to be dark down here. So if you gotta introduce a little bit of that really almost dark value, okay.
That happened
Maybe
quick.
here. Okay, now we're just gonna keep going, okay?
This is fast paced.
I'm taking my round 6 and I'm going to make a circle and lift and pat it on my paper towel.
Whoa.
Okay? So you see how that lifts up a lighter value?
Yes.
Now you don't want to be too rough here because your paper, and I've tried this with 3 different types of paper and 3 different types of paint, and every single time I degraded my paper. And what does degraded mean? That means that it started to lift. The like paper itself started to peel. Okay, and then another thing that you can do is you can just use your paper towel. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll use my paper towel to like lift and then use my brush to round it out.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm doing several different sizes of circles here. So they're not all exactly the same.
How long did it take you to degrade the paper?
I mean, it depends on how like hard I rubbed and scrubbed.
Okay.
So like if you're scrubbing really hard on this first layer, you're gonna get some some peeling. But that's why I want you guys to be gentle, and also use the damp paintbrush to help you. So like to help lift color, you can wet an area and sometimes just let that water sit there for a second and then go in with the paper towel and lift. And you want to make sure you overlap the circles too. Now you might also get some like fuzzy edges a little bit. That didn't really bother me. You can see it on my reference photo that I do get some fuzziness, and I think it's fine.
I mean, I feel like bokeh really isn't bokeh isn't sharp.
Right.
So I think I like the fuzzy edges.
And you just kind of keep going. And sometimes another thing that you can do is maybe you just like put the damp, you're basically like placing water in circles and let that sit for a second, and then you can go back in and lift and sharpen and kind of like tighten it up. Now the reason why I'm only doing like a couple at a time this way is because if I were to sit and let these water drops dry for a very long time, then that kind of like explosion edge would be much harder to rub out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Actually, Keenan, do you mind grabbing me another paper towel?
Yep. I mean, nope. I do not mind. I'll grab you two.
Thank you. So, and then I kind of want to show you just like using a damp paper towel. So if I were to take this paper towel and wet it with clean water and just try and round it out. I feel like I get the best results by putting the water first, lifting, and then kind of smoothing it and shaping it with my paintbrush.
It looks so cool.
And don't forget to do it like off the paper too, off the edges. So I'm kind of seeing where my paper is kind of like bleeding, and I'm trying to smooth that out. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm okay with a little bit of fuzziness, but I don't want it to like distract from the overall effect. Mm-hmm. I also, you see how there's like a value shift right here very clearly along this line from dark to light? I sometimes like to put my glare spot like right in the middle of that transition.
Cool.
And let's do, now the lightest value ones, I probably should have like attacked, maybe not attack is the right word, but I probably should have addressed those areas first, because with the amount of water and paint that we had over here in the light values, it was the least amount of water and paint, which means it's going to dry the fastest. So now lifting color from this side will be a little bit tricky. Where the dark, I can still tell that it's damp. So I know that I have a little bit of time left. The reason why I kind of like this way of kind of doing it in one pass and quickly is I feel like when we're forced to work quickly, we have to make decisions quickly. And when we have to make decisions quickly, our ability to look at something and then just move on it increases. So you kind of like just got to go with it. And I think that in watercolor, that's a great skill to have, to just be willing to go all in, because you don't have time to like do anything else. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So at this point, I can tell that my paper is starting to dry. because of it's getting a little bit trickier and trickier to lift. Gosh, doesn't this look cool?
It already looks cool. I've been watching it develop slowly but surely, and it's been fantastic.
And this is definitely one of those things where, like, the farther back you get, the cooler it looks, too.
The 20-foot rule.
Yes.
That's what my car is. The 20-foot rule is.
That's the rule for me, too, like 20-foot rule. Like, far away, I'm looking
That's why the camera's way back.
Yes. The next time it's just, like, across the room, and I'm like,
football
this big.
field. Yeah.
Don't worry, I be looking cute like that. Okay. So I put a water drop down here, and I'm just kind of going in and cleaning up, lifting, and then shaping it to a circle. Now remember, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. And whenever you get, like, one thing that I'll do, if I get a wonky circle or if I'll get a bleed that I don't like, then I'm like, oh, perfect opportunity. Another circle here. So then there's so many layers of circles, you're just like, is that a wonky one? Is there another one on top? What's going on here?
No one knows.
No one knows. You can just kind of mess with it that way. Now the benefit of the, what I talked about earlier of people doing like a wash, letting it dry, lifting, doing another wash, is you can introduce different colors into that mixture. Does that make sense?
Oh, snap.
So some that you would lift would be like yellow and some that you would lift would be orange, that kind of thing, which is a great technique. But I still really struggled to get the color differences when I was trying it that way. So an option, and I actually just tried this recently, so I know that it works, is instead of doing like a yellow wash lifting, orange wash lifting, pink wash lifting, is in your initial wash, just do multicolored washes at once.
Okay.
So you see how we adjusted, like we did a value?
Yeah.
You can do that with different colors. Like if you're trying to create a scene, like what I did is I did like a grassy field with like a sun. So the top was yellow and then the bottom was like more greens and like purples for a field. And that worked too. So I was able to get those different colors within these glares without having to do layer upon layer upon layer. You see what I'm saying?
Yep. That's crazy. That makes me think of, and I don't know if I'm thinking of it correctly, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it makes me think of multicolored Christmas lights.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
Sweet.
And there's even, gosh, I really wish I can remember the tutorial. There is another watercolor artist on YouTube who did a bokeh tutorial like this with Christmas lights in the background. So they were multicolored with an ornament in the foreground.
That's genius.
I wish I could remember who it was because I would say it. But I'm sure some of you guys know who watch us on YouTube. So, but it was a great, I didn't watch that tutorial, but I saw some of the projects that people were making from it in our watercolor group. Beautiful, just so beautiful. Okay. And I feel like I need, like, I'm gonna do a big one down here because you see how big these circles are here, which I don't mind. I don't mind that those are big, but the rest are small. So I kind of want to like introduce a bigger circle so those don't feel like so out of place. Because again, our brain loves to make patterns. So if you're not paying attention, all your circles are going to be evenly spaced and the same size.
Which is not what we're going for?
I like the variation in circle size, personally.
So then in the example of a Christmas light setup, say you take a photo at yourself and your reference photo is a perfectly lined up set of lights. And you put that, for your example, an ornament in the middle. Would that would still, like, you'd still have to play with, go along with your reference photo to get that bokeh?
There's two ways that you can approach a reference photo.
Okay.
First of all, if you have a reference photo that breaks all of the rules that I've ever told you, you have every right to ignore me. because that's possible. I mean, lighting is everything, and lighting, where it comes from and the source and what's around it, could change everything about your painting. So if you have a reference photo where you're like, my reference photo is telling me that all of these glare spots are the same size, then follow that reference photo. Or the other option is you can look at a reference photo and you can see that all of the glare spots are the same size, but maybe you're not interested in that and you want there to be variation. Maybe you go to paint it and your glare spots are just coming out uneven. That's when you have the right as an artist to say, I know that this is what my reference photo is telling me, but I don't have to listen to that either. And that is the joy of creating, is you are the one that gets to make that final decision, and no one can say anything because you are the one that created it. So to Keenan's point, yeah, if you have a reference photo that's telling you they're all the same size, you have every right to follow it. Or you can have the opposite, and you get to decide. It's up to you.
Sweet.
And sometimes what I've noticed is, like, when we see really, and I'm kind of going off topic here, but I think that this is super helpful to know. A lot of the times, our brain is so used to seeing what we see that we usually only stop and look at something if it's unique, like if it's crazy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And sometimes we get a photograph of that crazy thing, like the way, like, let's say a bird is trying to get like a fish out of the ocean and it kind of looks super cool and crazy and like this other thing. Or maybe you see a tree that's like way wonky and not what you would normally see, so you take a picture of it. And usually our go-to is to say, that is so cool, I want to paint that. But it actually is really tricky to try and take something three-dimensional and move it into something two-dimensional, and especially to communicate that with something that our brain doesn't normally see. Does that make sense? Yeah. So when we go and look for reference photos, I don't want you to look for reference photos of the way of, I need to find the coolest scene in the world that nobody has ever seen, and I'm going to try and paint that. Because you just added a layer of difficulty in trying to communicate that scene and what's happening there to a viewer. It's easier to go about like doing that initial transfer on things that we know that other people have seen, because then their brain does so much of the hard work for us. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So, and I learned that because I was in my advanced painting class, and there was a young lady there. You know those like fish reflectors that are on the store, or like those big reflectors that when you look at it, it kind of makes it feel like a fish lens, and everything's like,
yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
She tried, so it was a store window with one of those reflectors and her looking at it, right? Which is like so many different elements there that from a photograph, it's even tricky to see what's going on. And then to try and take that and use painting and drawing and whatever to communicate that, like, it was interesting because it was actually really hard to figure out what was going on. And it wasn't her lack of ability, it was our lack of our brain seeing that scene. Does that make sense? And so we openly talked about when we were doing critiques, like, how easy it is for us to want to do something different because we find that interesting, but how it just it just makes it really hard for other people to recognize what's actually going on.
Like too much.
Too much. Like almost like, wait, I have never taken the time to look at the way I look reflected on a fish lens in a store window. So like my brain can't recognize what's happening, and it's working really hard to try and figure it out.
Trippy.
And when we're first starting, at least, we don't want, like, I love having to do like as little work as possible for somebody to know what's going on, right? Maybe that says a lot about me and my laziness, but I'm just saying. Okay. And at that point, I was pretty much done doing my dots, so I hope I didn't mess you guys up by talking so much. But I think it's valuable to know that, because when we try and do that, and people have a hard time seeing what's happening, we think that we're doing something wrong, when really it's just like their brain doesn't actually know what that scene is, because that's not something they usually see. So I don't want you to be like sad or feel like you did something wrong, or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Okay. Keenan, can you go to the overhead? Ba-bam! awesome. Y'all see that?
That looks amazing.
So cool, right?
Right now, without anything in the foreground, it actually makes me think of like a bubbling acid.
Oh, totally. I can see that.
You know?
Yes. Almost like a witch's brew.
Ooh, I was actually thinking of when the Hulk gets angry and his blood boils and he turns green.
Okay, and one other thing that you can do is, this is just something that's bothering me. This circle and this circle have completely, you see how like when you layer the circles, you can still sometimes get a hint of the two different shapes.
Mm-hmm.
This one kind of bled into each other so evenly that there's no distinction. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll go in with just a little bit of color.
Oh. Bring that back to life.
And just shape it just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just enough where I could be like, no, 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 this is another glare spot layered on top.
Wow.
There we go, that feels better to me. Okay. And even this, even though this is dry, you can still lift. Do you want me to try?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna do a smaller one.
I mean, don't talk about it, be about it.
Oh, I'm all about being about it. Okay, so I'm just doing it slightly off the page. And what you're gonna do is basically just let the water sit there for a second.
That's all I know.
Okay, and then take your brush, lift, hit it on that paper towel. You see?
Dang, look at that. I'm not gonna say I was doubting you initially,
But kind of.
but you know, if someone else was here, they might have said they were doubting.
Okay, now I want to point out a couple of things that just for me looking at this is kind of bothering me as an artist, but I want to show you what you can do about it. This hard dark line is bothering me, and this hard bleed is bothering me.
That's interesting because I like those a lot.
Okay.
They don't, for me, they don't detract. It almost seems like those pop up above what is beneath, where that dark layer is, like that just has expanded, been hidden by highlights.
Okay.
Like that's what it made me think.
Yes. Okay, so I love this. I love this because it shows you that for me, as a person painting it, I tend to be hypercritical of myself, where I'm just like, that's an issue, that's an issue. And someone looking at this says, that's not an issue. So this is a great opportunity for you to step away from your painting if you're feeling like there are issues, and then coming back later and being like, wait, are these actual issues, or am I just being super hard on myself because that's who we are as people and as a society, and we're not gonna do that anymore. The other thing that you can do is you can try and lift a circle right here to kind of like, not totally, you can't totally make this hard edge disappear. It's been dry and it's been there way too long, but you can at least lighten it. And sometimes just making it a lighter value will make it not as contrasty, which will make it not stand out as much. Or when you go to put in your stems and flowers on top, you can purposely angle a stem and do white blossoms on top of it and cover it. So this is what I mean when I say you get to make decisions as you go, because as you paint things, there might be one spot that you're like, oh, I just wish I could address that. Well, guess what? We got bleed proof white, my friends, which means we can use that as an opportunity to paint something on top of it, not to cover it. We're covering it, but I mean, I guess like, not to, how do I say this? You can't use bleed proof white to cover a spot as if it's white paper and then paint on top of that again. That will not work. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I can't take this bleed proof white and paint this square white and it will be like the watercolor paper again.
Got it.
So don't think that that's what bleed proof white is for. Sorry, I think I just spilled this.
Luckily, we love our tables looking crazy.
Okay, so at this point, I'm gonna wanna make sure that my paper is dry. And actually, if I'm looking at it from the side, I did pretty good. I don't see a lot of peeling, maybe a little bit right here. But besides that, my paper stayed strong. And if you do get a little bit of peeling, it's not the end of the world. Like I've done, how many other? Four other bokeh paintings. And even with like 100% cotton paper, and I used 2 other brands, I still got peeling because I did so many layers and I was getting a little bit like rough with it. And I just let it go. Like on the spots that they were peeling, I was just like, okay, that paper has had enough. So I'm gonna let it be and move on. Okay.
Cool.
Gosh, this looks so cool, doesn't it?
It's crazy that you did this with watercolor. Yeah. That's my favorite thing.
Okay, do we have, oh yes, here. Can I use this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna just use my heat gun to make sure this is totally dry before we do our next step. I also want to say that all of our paintings are going to look different from each other in the way of there's no outline with these dots. We are freehanding that. We are deciding where these dots are going. And frankly, I'm not being like too strategic about it. I'm just lifting, overlapping, lifting, all of this stuff. So that is to say, if you finish this and you're just like, this is okay, I don't really love the placement of my glare spots, do another one. You know?
Yeah.
Keep going. You can create the coolest thing. I've been having so much fun with this technique. I can't even. All right. Sorry. Okay. Another thing, and I'm trying to debate if I should do it. How about I'll tell you and then Keenan, you tell me if we should. Another thing that I do sometimes, you know how I went in and painted that circle here? Mm-hmm. If I feel like my dots or glares, I didn't do this with the reference, but it's an option. If I feel like my glare spots on my light values are too similar in value, then sometimes I will go and work around the glare spots and do another layer on the background around the glare spots. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's an option, and I've done that with my other stuff. If I just felt like it wasn't poking, like standing out as much as I want it to. I'm just seeing if I can lift a little bit more, but I doubt I can. Then like I could go in and work around and kind of do like, gosh, what is that technique called, Keenan? When we paint around our subject.
Oh, it's called paint around the subject. Got it. I'm glad I was here for that.
Keenan?
You were lost.
Actually, I think this is lifting up a little bit. Do you see?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Ooh, I like that.
The thought I had, and again, I haven't painted this at all.
Yeah.
So I could be wrong. But you mentioned degrading a lot. Mm-hmm. And so when you do that, go back to those lighter ones and lift again from them, rather than, you were saying, make the background darker, mm-hmm. you have the possibility of degrading that paper more.
Yes.
So if you go around it with darkening it, you're a little safer.
Exactly. Keenan, I'm glad that you said that. If you, in some of these dots where you're just like, I want to lighten them, but my paper is peeling, and I know that if I just keep doing it, it's going to make it worse and worse. That's where maybe you could go in and paint around them. But I'm doing look at that lifting.
Yeah, that looks good.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, we're gonna do just a couple more. I want this to be lighter. Will it actually be lighter? I don't know. So again, I'm just using my 6 and I'm being gentle. I am not scrubbing my paper hard. Let's see if the paper towel will do more work. I also will have to say that I was really nervous about teaching this. I knew that this was a technique that I wanted to teach you guys for a while, but like it was so time consuming, and I didn't know if it would work great with the liquid watercolors. And so I was just like putting it off. And then when like I tried it where I did the single run and I just lifted from there, I was so excited that I literally, like, whoever was in the office that day, I was like, come here, look at what I did. This is awesome. And I was just like, so happy that it worked because I wasn't sure if it was going to work.
I remember that day.
Yeah, I was like literally making everybody stop what they were doing and come see
And
what I
it was
painted.
totally worth it.
Yeah?
Because look at how these look. These are amazing.
These are so cool, right?
Yes.
I'm going to try and lift up here. Now, another option is I'm giving you guys so many options here, but it's good. It's good for you to hear all the ways. Some people will use like, and this is maybe better with like gouache, but they'll actually use bleed-proof white as the white areas. They'll take the white and paint white highlighted circles, which you can do, but I want to do just a word of caution, which is bleed-proof white is more like a gouache in the way that there is a level of opaqueness that is not true for other watercolor paints, which means if you just did white dots on top of here just like this, they might stand out a little bit more because they're not transparent. Does that make sense?
Yep. I think of it like a paste.
Yeah.
Rather than opaque, I guess makes sense. I don't need to add to it.
All right, I need to stop, but I want to keep going because I think it's so fun, but I really need to stop because y'all are busy. You're like, we can't just paint.
We still have the form round to do.
We still got half of the painting to do. All right. Now I got to dry it again. I love that lifted up just a little more.
I know, those look good.
Now, one thing, and I think it's because I was talking so much, so the painting had time to dry more. If you look at my reference photo, I don't have as many hard edges around my dots, you see? Like here I have some pretty hard edges. That's because this painting dried a lot longer before I went into the lift than this one did. This one, I would just like went for it and wasn't stopping to talk about what I was doing. So if you don't like the hard edges and because you were following me and you had to stop and listen to me talk and you're so bugged with me right now, do another one without me talking and just going straight in and lifting, and that will help with those dark rings, okay?
Okay.
But they're not bad, I'm just saying. Okay, now that my painting is dry, I'm gonna go in and do step 3. I'm gonna do my stems. So I'm gonna take emerald green, and I'm gonna take berry blue, and I'm gonna take Payne's gray, and I'm gonna mix like a really dark green. Essentially, I just want it to be darker than the darkest value on my paper, okay? And you can do any kind of stem. I don't even know what this is. This is just like me playing. There's got to be something that looks like this in nature, but
There has to be.
I can't tell you what, but I'm pretty confident
I've seen it in one of the Hulk movies, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And I'm going to take my 2, and I'm just going to start doing my stems, thin lines. So to do thin lines, you're going to hold your brush vertically, light pressure, and you're just going to kind of move your elbow, move from your elbow, not from your wrist. So you see? And do a few stems. So I'm going to do some this way, this way. That one got a little bit long, but that's okay.
That's going to look cool.
Maybe coming in over here. And then after I do a few, I'll go in and kind of thicken them up. Still using my 2. This one, I want it to be a little bit longer. Okay, and maybe I'm gonna have one slightly go up this way to activate this space here. And I feel like I should have another one here. Even though that's not really what's happening in my reference photo, it just feels right. Okay. And if you're laying this down and these just are not showing up, it really just depends on how dark your background is. You can even go and use straight Payne's gray. Like, the rule is there are no rules, you know?
I do know.
There, that shows up a little bit better. Okay. And now what I'm going to do to kind of give these dimension is I'm going to take my bleed proof white and mix it a little bit with my green to get like, now this will be opaque, but we're using it as a highlight, so it's not a huge deal. And on the side of these kind of little stems that I painted, I'm going to add a highlight to them. Boop. And that's just going to make them pop a little bit more.
Well, because you got a north side and a south side.
Yeah, even little stems, even thin little stems, to make them dimensional, you need to have 2 values. And so I'm just going for dark and light, that's it. Because I don't want to like try and do more than that. And I don't think I need to. But I want it to pop from my background. And you see, I'm kind of doing it like a sketch. It doesn't have to be a continuous line. Think about how light hits something, you know, like it just, sometimes you see more of it and sometimes you don't.
In this scenario, we see this much light of it.
In this scenario, we see, doesn't that feel?
Yep.
All right. Gosh, I love this project. Okay. Now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go in and do my like blossoms, and then you can like add your leaves. So bleed proof white is really thick like a paste, and sometimes it comes dried. Like, just so you know, I opened this up and it was dried. I just put clean water on top of it and it will reactivate when wet. So it's not a huge deal, but I just wanna like call attention to that. I'm gonna grab my 2. And I'm going to pick up some bleed proof white, and then just kind of wherever I want, think of like baby's breath, you know, or Queen Anne's lace. There's like gatherings of blossoms. And you can do this technique with so many different types of flowers, with really anything in the foreground. I actually, the one that I was just talking about where I did a multicolored background before lifting up the dots, it was lavender. And I did lavender in the foreground. And it worked out great. The other thing that you can do is if you have, do you remember when we used that drawing gum marker?
Yes.
To mask off an area. So if you're doing like a thicker flower, or if you don't want to use like just bleed proof white in your foreground, you want to do a colorful flower, you can use masking fluid to mask off whatever shape is going to be in your foreground, and then do your wash and everything on top of it. Yes, Keenan?
I was going to ask if you could use that for the bokeh.
Yes. Yep. But I would think so in theory, but I've never tried it.
Right.
But I would think so. The only thing is like with masking fluid, you have to rub a lot off. So I would be afraid that if I was doing a paint layer, masking fluid, rubbing off, paint layer, like all the layers of rubbing and stuff like that, that would be really hard on my paper. But I could be wrong.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So, but in theory, that should work totally.
That'd be wild.
Just kind of, as you can see, there's really no strategy to these dots. I just want to make sure they overlap, because I feel like that is more true to what we see. Now, I also want to call attention to the fact that the bleed proof white is going to stand out against a dark background way more than the light background. You see this one compared to this one? Mm-hmm. This one sticks out way more. And that's just the nature of painting on different valued backgrounds. And then now that I've kind of put in my blossoms, I can go back in with my like really dark value and then like kind of add little leaves or like stems leading up to these blossoms. So I'm just kind of working around. What's already there. Adding little brush details, little leaves maybe. I just feel like this needs to be dark underneath here. There we go.
I've seen some ponds that are this color, the green.
Yeah.
And this could be someone focusing on this flower and someone else splashing into the pond. And it'd just be that right there, boom.
Boom.
Picture taken.
Gosh, and that's our project.
Ooh.
Isn't that so fun?
That is amazing.
Now, one thing that I'm calling attention to that I didn't notice till right now is this. Do you see this hard line? Right here?
Yes. I thought of it as like a sunlight, a sunbeam.
I don't like it.
Okay.
So let's just see if we can lift it.
Or disrupt it.
Or disrupt that line. And all of these circles right here are the same shape, or the same size. Do you notice that?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to make this one bigger on purpose to disrupt not only this line, but the pattern that I've created here.
Patterns. Brains are crazy. That's nice.
That worked out. And even like, you can't really do it with anything that's over the branches, but you can still lift color after. Just take a damp brush.
That's cool.
So there's just, I don't know. You can totally tell between my reference and this one how extra I've been with the dots in this one. There's like triple the amount of glare spots in this one. And sometimes it doesn't have to be like, play with it. Try some where there's just a few. Try some where there's a lot. Try some where they're all the same size, and try some where there's different size. Try some with multicolors. Try some with one color. Like, experiment and play, because that's how we learn best. So that's our project. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with. I mean, this is such a wonderful technique, and it really, the sky is the limit in terms of opportunity of where you can go with this. So if you're on Facebook, I would love to see what you're making. I mean, that watercolor group, I really pay attention to what you guys are interested in learning and what you're currently painting and how I can maybe teach you something. So that's called Let's Make Art Watercolor on Facebook. It is large, but it is very welcoming and kind group. We're also on Instagram. You can find us at Let's Go Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art Watercolor. And if you need any of these supplies, you can find them at letsmakeart.com. And Keenan, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week. Bye.